Denise Griffitts, and this is your partner in Success Radio. And today's guest challenges us to think differently about money, not simply as dollars and cents, but as something deeply connected to our mindset, our beliefs, and even our emotional and spiritual well being. Joining us today is Stephen K. D. Silva. He is the author of Money and the Prosperous Soul. It is on my desk. In fact, it lives on my desk. I rarely even put it on the bookcase. And he is the founder of Prosperous Soul, Financial Sozo, and Purpose Train. And for decades, he has helped thousands of individuals, couples, and organizations discover healthier relationships with money and greater financial capacity. And do you ever feel like you need more than just a business coach, a health coach, or a relationship coach? Because your challenges don't fit in one neat category? That's where our sponsor, Dr. Anna Marie, comes in, and she is known as the mindset doctor because she coaches the whole person, not just one piece of your life. And with a background spanning natural medicine, communication, and business, she brings a rare integrated perspective, and she's walked this path herself. Trust me. Dr. Anna Marie now works exclusively one-on-one with people who are ready to step into what she calls the extraordinary life that they're meant to live. So if you're curious if you're a fit, take her free quantum alignment assessment at happywholeyou.com and follow her on Instagram, Dr. Anna Marie, to learn more. Now back to my guest, Stephen K. D. Silva. If you have ever wondered why intelligent, hardworking people still struggle financially, or why success doesn't always bring financial peace, this conversation is for you. Stephen, welcome to your partner in Success Radio. It's such a pleasure to have you here, and I love your book.
Thank you, Denise. It's such a delight to be here and to share what I've learned.
Listen, this book, and I've told you this. Anybody who listens to me knows I read. I'll read the back of a cereal box if that's the only thing in front of me, and I don't eat cereal. But I have thousands of books in this room, and every single book, without exception, was gifted to me by people who have been my guests on this show. And I do have special shelves for the ones that I'm constantly grabbing, or, that I know that there's something in there I need that day. It might be an inspiration. It might be just a sentence that I can't get it out of my head. Yours doesn't make it to the shelf. It literally lives on my desk. I finally got tired of grabbing it and putting it over here. Now it just stays.
That's such a privilege. Thank you. That's delightful to hear.
Oh, listen, I can't tell lies. I don't have any filters. So I'm telling you the absolute truth.
That's
What,
awesome.
what is it? Tell people who you are. Tell our audience who you are and what you do, because you're not just talking about money and spirituality. You're talking about business. You're talking about everything that impacts us.
Well, thank you. I think I would call myself a recovering accountant, actually. I think I'm getting over that phase of my life, although I love my time as a CPA and the CFO period of my life where I was running an organization financially. But the mindsets around accountants is very linear, very structured, very compliant oriented. And I have another side of my life, and that was my musician side, my creative side, my visionary side. So I think to describe myself as a recovering accountant fits because I'm kind of growing into and have grown into the rest of myself, and that's a very creative part and a very in I look inward, I study myself and understand myself and trying to be an authentic version of myself rather than just an adapted person. We tend to adapt, and we need to adapt to our environments, but sometimes that adaptive lifestyle leaves us pretty narrow or one-dimensional. And that was where I was living maybe 20 or more years ago, probably more years ago, but that's where I am now. I have a pretty fun life. I'm loving it.
And listen, I know a lot of accountants. I'm related to one. They're like engineers. You know,
Yes.
where is your sense of humor? What happened? You're not that way at all, though.
Oh, it's funny you say that because I remember going to an annual training, and in this training, we were learning a certain, fact about taxes because I was doing some tax preparation for a period of time. But I remember walking into this auditorium filled with probably 500 accountants and realizing this is not my tribe. Who are these people? I want to have fun and laugh and visit, and everything is very pin protectors in the pocket. This is not to diminish accountants. I am
No,
one.
not at all, and
So
I know a
yeah,
lot of engineers as well,
yeah,
and once you kinda break that shell or you startle the heck out of them and they laugh,
that's hilarious.
that's a whole different thing.
That's super fun. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I like that side of my life because it helps me get things done and helps me build systems and structures and investments and plans and all of those kinds of things. But we need to be whole. We need to round ourselves out. I think we were created to be authentic and genuine, and we sometimes that other side, that dark side of the moon, is kind of hidden. And so we've got to go illuminate it and go wander around over there. Hopefully, some of my material can help people do that.
I love that, and, I talk with a lot of people, and I'm realizing that as people get more than about 3 decades on board, that's when they start looking at themselves. They're
Yeah,
saying,
that's
"Hmm,
that's brilliant. Yeah, yeah.
yeah."
I think
I
it's
mean,
around the
that first, 30 through 30 years, you're doing what you're supposed to do. You're working, you're building a family, you're doing everything else, but then after that, you're like, "Hey, what about me?"
yeah. It's almost like I came into myself, and I've observed others as well, including my own sons. There's something around that mid-30 range where a person seems to kind of come into themselves and own their territory, and I think that gives them permission, or at least the space to start evaluating and thinking, "Okay, now who am I and why am I here?" Because boy, the first 25 years of life is so busy, isn't it? My goodness.
Yeah, yeah, and you don't really know who you are, and I remember when I was 17, 18 years old, I was a sociopath. We all are. I mean, we really
That's
we're
right.
not human, and the arrogant and snot-nosed and just I look back and go, "Oh, I'm surprised my mother didn't just smash me with her car."
Oh
I'm
my
surprised that
gosh.
I was able to get past all of that.
Somehow we survive, yeah,
We
somehow.
do. We really do. But, once you start looking at yourself and working on yourself and giving yourself, in your case, permission to say, "Hey, that's not the only part of me," life does open up, doesn't it?
Well, that is I think a superpower of your audience is that is an introspective group that are working actively on improving themselves. And I've followed you for a while, and I've enjoyed that information, both of your podcasts. So yeah, to a hat off or a nod there to you and what you're doing in your community of growers.
Well, thank you. And listen, everybody, Stephen is also a sponsor of both of our podcasts. So thank you, Stephen.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, now let's talk about money. Let's get to
Okay.
what we were going to talk about. You and I were having such a great time in the virtual green room. I was like, I don't want to do the podcast now. I just want to keep on talking with him. But here we are. So, in your book, you talk about financial capacity. And honestly, that's not something that a word that or a phrase that trips off your tongue, is it?
No,
So,
yeah,
what is financial
capacity.
capacity?
Well, I wrote the book about an observation and an experience of uh, advance and decline, or we could put different words there, but I would increase and decrease, increase, decrease. So I was aware that in the financial space, there are gains and losses, not just business, because I do have a business and I've built a couple and sold them and crashed a couple and had all of those experiences, but also in our personal home life, in our economics at home. I've noticed this up and down, and I wrote the book realizing that there are mindsets are that are toxic, kind of crippling in my thinking, And that book is really a reflection of, oh, as I discovered and replaced what those mindsets were, I remedied a bunch of my cycling ups and downs. Eventually, I realized that the cycles I was perceiving these cycles. If you can imagine, if I was drawing on a whiteboard, I would draw up and down, up and down, up and down across like a wave across the whiteboard. I originally perceived that there was a limit above me. That is, when I would reach that limit, I couldn't break through. And then because I didn't break through, I would fall back to the base or the trough, summit, trough, summit, trough. And I recognize that in my own life. I recognize across my generations, my family. I recognized it in people that I was beginning to work with as an accountant. And then as I began to travel, I realized this is what appears to be a global fact, a generational fact. And so the capacity word that you bring out is really fascinating for me, Denise, because I have now realized that there are some limits. There is a ceiling for some, but I would have to pull it back to maybe 1% of the time there's a ceiling. I actually now think it's a foundation problem and not a lid problem. And the foundation is the the trough. We all have a trough, a place we kind of find ourselves coming back to. But when we work hard and persevere and use the tools that we all know, some of it, some of our tools are from desperation, others are from inspiration. Regardless, we find our way climbing again and again and again. And the question is, can we raise our floor? Can we lift our capacity? Because if we do, let's imagine we reach a summit on this series and we get to a summit or a new breakthrough, a new income, new opportunities, new ability to communicate, new favor, relationships, whatever might be happening there. Can we make that our new floor? And if we do, that becomes the trough. So that's the idea of capacity. It's raising the foundation higher, building our ability to carry more. And as we build that capacity, that becomes kind of the baseline. And then the next time we grow, we reach a new level. So that's where you get the idea of levels, or moving from floor to floor to floor, like a staircase. We can move higher and higher, but if you don't have capacity, you're gonna you're gonna return to your floor. You're going to return to that
Right.
because that's our place of stability and
And we're used
competence.
to it. Right. We're
Yeah,
used to being there.
familiarity,
Right.
exactly.
And when you mentioned summit, you get up there, you get to that summit. Well, I immediately figured I'm gonna slide right down that sucker.
Yeah,
I think
I
it's
mean,
kinda what you're saying, you
we
just like
have.
you go as far as you go, and then you're back down.
Yeah, and anecdotally or experientially, we might say, well, this is what I do. I slide back down. Once I reach these peaks, I slide back down. But see, that is a mindset issue that I talk about in the book. Rechanging our internal conversation and our belief structures is key to capacity. I really think that skills will always bow to belief systems. And I say that because in the financial space, I have a lot of skills. Just as a CPA, I am retired now, but just as a career around money, studying it, reading it, reporting on it, interpreting it, I have a lot of skill around money, probably more than most. But if my belief system is stunted, let's say my skill level is a 9, and my belief system or how I think about myself and about money is a 3, my skill is going to bow to that level 3. In order to grow my capacity, I'm going to have to work on both sides. I've got to work on the skill side and the belief side, or the practical side and the spiritual side. I've got to get both to a 9. And when opportunity comes to reach a 10, I've got to grow both sides. And that will become my new floor. And then what will happen is an opportunity to grow to an 11, a 12, a 15, a 200. Those upward opportunities are always coming at us. But the question always comes down is, will we grow our capacity?
And are you willing to identify when they show up? Or
Yeah,
do you
that's
back
right.
up and say, "Oh, I don't know how to do that," or "I can't." Listen, I don't use the word can't. I won't. You
See,
know,
that's a great
yeah,
skill right there.
it's
Yeah.
a bad word. I'll tell you I won't swim because I'll drown, but I never tell you I can't swim, because if I had to, I probably would. But, it's just when you start limiting yourself and you don't
Yeah.
realize that you've reached some kind of invisible financial ceiling or some kind of great thing that's coming towards you and you don't recognize it or identify it, then you don't
Mhm.
take advantage of it. But
That's exactly right.
I think, honestly, at some gut well, look, our we know deep down that we're making mistakes. We just don't verbalize it.
Mhm.
And, my gut belief is I always turn everything over to my subconscious for review when I'm going to sleep. And I get my
Mm.
answers at 3:18 every morning. But our subconscious is paying attention, and if we keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again, doesn't that kinda cement it?
Yeah, I think it grows the familiarity
Right, right.
idea, and you said something a moment ago that I just wanna put a highlight on. You said that we don't even sometimes know when we're making these limitations or these mistakes. And I think that's because we are familiarity animals. We're creatures that prefer familiar surroundings and order. The order enables us to take risks, but when disorder comes, we have to retract our efforts and kind of stabilize and return order as quickly as we can. So order is the bias for things that are familiar. But once, like if I get like I'm in an office right now, if there's some kind of a um, animal that is hazardous, let's say it's a porcupine in my office, and I just learn to live with this porcupine in this little office that I'm in, I become familiar. And but around that familiarity, there are limiting facts that emerge. I have to constantly be aware. I'm vigilant all the time. I'm distracted. Where is the porcupine? And so familiarity is a two-edged sword. We That is also the place that we can grow. We can, through different methods like uh, opening up your review before you fall asleep and discovering. Another method is just being with a community of people that are talking and aware. And that's, of course, your community here, or friendships, or mentorships, or coaches, or however we do it. As we get around other people that are healthy and also growing, somebody finally points at, hey, you have a porcupine living in your office. And I go, well, yeah. So, and, because I'm familiar with it. And then somebody or some source can say, that's not actually a good idea. I'm sure the porcupine is a fine animal, but let's move him out in the woods where he belongs and get him out of your office, get him out of your life. And I think that's where familiarity can dull us to the things that are crippling our capacity. And sources beyond ourselves can help awaken us to the familiarity, or to the problem, to the weakness, to the wound. And then we can go seek help and get that upgrade, get that change. And so that's where I work with people, is to help them recognize what are the rules of healthy money. How does money work if it's a both practical and a spiritual object in our lives? How are we supposed to deal with that? And then, oh, also awareness of, oh, you've got some porcupines. We got to get rid of those and exchange them for something better. And so, yeah, that's the basic model for any growth or healing in any area of our lives, right? Whether it's relationships or physical health, or business modeling, any of those
Right.
things?
Absolutely. Years ago, and you reminded me of something that happened many, many years ago. I hired my first business coach, and I didn't know how to behave. I really didn't because I didn't know what I was asking, what she was teaching me.
Wow.
And I was basically, I think, doing an awful lot of whining. In fact, I know I was. I'm just going to say it. I was whining. And she was so patient with me. And finally, I think she just about had enough because I was complaining about the same stuff over and over again, but I wasn't fixing it. And she got very quiet one day and she said, and I thought, she's going to fire me. She's going to fire me right now. And I was ready to weep and cry and gnash my teeth
And complain about
and,
that too.
and complain. And she said very quietly, she said, Denise? And I went, yes, ma'am. She said, what are you tolerating? That changed my life. It really did because I
Wow.
was tolerating a whole lot of stuff that I shouldn't have been, that I wasn't even aware of. So now, and this was many years ago, probably 20 years ago, I still ask myself on a regular basis, Denise, what are you tolerating? And then I go clean it out.
Wow. I love that. I love
She
the
didn't fire me.
proactivity in that.
She didn't fire
Yeah?
me though. So no, she didn't. Thank goodness. But after that, I think I didn't whine quite as much. So she kept me on.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
But it's important because we have these limiting beliefs and we don't typically know where they originate, but we need to clean them out. And I think that's
Mhm.
what you're telling us.
Mhm. I think it helps to, since we're on the topic of capacity, I would um, kind of open that up a little bit because when we talk about these ideas, one of the things that I get annoyed by are language that's used but never defined or explained. Give me some, this is the accountant in me. Give me the debits and credits. How does this thing work? What are the rules? I think that capacity is shaped like a triangle. And just to get really practical, I think there are three sides to a triangle, as there are with capacity, and those sides are protection, provision, and identity or worth, self-worth. And that triangle represents the strongest geometric shape. So if we're talking foundations, you want your capacity triangle to be drawn below your trough. So if I had somebody who came to me and they said, "Yeah, I over and over I keep gaining and losing, and every time I get ahead, something comes and you know I have to repair the car or I get a whatever, and something takes it away from me." Okay, so if we were to draw that out, I would say this person has capacity, but it shows up at the troughs, if you can picture that. Um, there's a little triangle below that. And so if a person wants to grow capacity, what I'm going to do is start looking at the three sides in their lives. Do you have protection issues? In other words, are things invading you and taking from you? That's protection generally. Um, Provision is, are you getting what you need? Is enough coming? And the last one is your self worth. The last one being the base of the triangle. How do you perceive yourself? If I understand myself as worthless, and surprising number of people do, they see themselves as not enough, not belonging, not worthy. And we kind of turn up our external volume to drown that out. But I'm talking about the quiet place where we're kind of we kind of come to that honest moment. We listen kind of to what the tapes are saying inside of our head, and that kind of says over and over again, "Yeah, I'm not really worth it. I'm not as worthy as Denise or Ben or somebody else." Those are like another class of people, and I'm kind of a poser. We would call that imposter syndrome.
Imposter
So
syndrome. We all have it.
yeah, man. And so that's a evidence of let's call it a wound or a bruise, uh, or an attack on the base of a capacity triangle. So all three of these things are clues. And if a person comes to me, I have a quiz that people take, and it gives them scores and also does some other things behind the curtain for me where I can look at a person and go, oh, you're a type 6 or you're a type 3 and you're a high score or a mid-low score. It gives me reference points. Really, it's very simple around this triangle shape because if we can move your score higher, let's say on the protection side, if we can move you from a score of 9 to a score of 29, that is reinforcing. In other words, you're applying your awareness to an area of your life and it's getting stronger and stronger. And that is what happens, when we look at things, when we measure things, when we track results, when we aim for something, a target beyond, and we accomplish that target. It might take us a week, might take us a year. But as we're paying attention and energy to a subject, it tends to get better. And this is the same with capacity. So, for your listeners to know that capacity is a cool concept, but how do you fix it or how do you change it? Well, first rule is yes, you can, and you can grow. In fact, I think we're intentionally supposed to be growing our capacity, especially if you have really high performers or really successful financial people, which I know that you do in your audience. What happens is capacity is always challenged by your next promotion. So I might today have a score that is, let's say, mid low. And let's say someone takes the quiz, we start working together, they start increasing their capacity. Let's say they reach a high score capacity. They haven't arrived, they've just built capacity at the third floor. And when they get their promotion to the seventh floor, their capacity might start waggling again because there's some new pressure, some greater pressure on an old idea that you were able to it wasn't irrelevant. It wasn't relevant for you maybe at the third floor, but at the seventh floor, that little tiny weakness begins to show up. And so a person through time will increase their score. A promotion will come, or two or three promotions. They might see their score fall. It's time. It doesn't mean that they have gone back to the bottom of the scores. It means, oh, I'm living at a higher level. When I was 10 years old, the pressures I was facing they were dramatic. What's this acne? What's this? Is my haircut right? But when I get to be, in my 40s, I have different responsibilities because I'm now living at the 20th floor. Maybe I'm in my 50s or 60s and just the pressures are different. Most people make their biggest wealth jump, their biggest monetizing events happen in their 60s and 70s. So, if you have the capacity, let's say, of a fourth floor performer, and suddenly you're living on the 20th floor, you better have some tools to build your capacity, or guess what? You're going to be demoted back to the place of capacity. And you don't want that. I don't want that.
So you really do need to pay attention pretty much all the time.
Yeah, I think you just pay attention, being self-aware of what's going on and what's coming out of you. I like to think of us when we're builders and founders or creators or performers. Many people are content to sit on the couch and complain, but the rest of us are actually building things. And when you're a builder, I think of us like a tube of toothpaste. And when you first get the tube and it's brand new and pretty from the store, it doesn't take much pressure to squeeze out toothpaste. And that's because that's like a first floor, second floor example. We're pretty new, you know, a coach, and I mean like a football coach or a baseball coach will say something and a pliable child will learn, I want to learn how to bat better. So they are quickly, the pressures quickly squeeze out their weakness, let's say, so to speak, the toothpaste. But as we get older and more adapted to our environments, more skillful in our professions or whatever it is we're building, what happens is most of the of the goo, most of the toothpaste is pushed out of us. But sometimes, like right now in my bathroom, I have a tube of toothpaste that I've been milking for for days. It's maybe weeks. It just cracks me up. It's like miraculously when this morning, I picked that thing up and I was like, okay, baby, it's you and me. And I really bear down on that little tube, and miraculously a little toothpaste comes out. I'm like, that's crazy. That's amazing.
And then you
Uh,
cut the end of it off to squeeze on that end too. I
oh,
do the
come
same.
on.
It's
That's
like it's
awesome.
a buck. Why am I worrying
why
about
why
this?
am
It's
I
a
got another
dollar.
tube right there. What
I
am I
know.
waiting for?
I
But
don't know.
but that's a great example of, high pressure tends to squeeze something out of us that we didn't know was there. And I think that is us. And as we get higher and higher in our destiny, in our purpose for living, pressure increases. And that isn't a threat to me or any of us. That's the fun of a journey. That's the cool thing. If something comes out of me, a fear, a doubt, a complaint, or like you were saying, if I begin to tolerate, those are great fingerprints for your audience to just think, okay, let's do a little inventory in our life. What am I tolerating? What a great quote from your coach. What am I, letting, where am I settling? And if I decide I don't really want to settle at the 12th floor, I am dreaming of the 50th floor. And so to get to that 50th floor, I better deal with this thing at the 12th floor. And a lot of times, those things that we need to deal with are invisible mostly to other people because, people aren't investigating us. That's not their job. They're out there. They might be judging us, but they're just out there busy too. And if we behave only based on what other people say, what an orphan experience that is. What a backward method of ruling our life that is, because we then become completely fear-based. We become moved like wind based on whatever others are saying. It's a much more powerful idea is to, in the privacy of our lives, when we're really honest and we think, you know what, I am I am accepting, tolerating, or settling for that idea. And I think I'm going to move that. I think I'm going to move that boundary. I'm going to get over that thing. And it's not easy. Oh, I kind of like that thing, but I'm going to let it go. And by letting it go, I might move into an area that I'm a little uncomfortable with. Well, I've got to build a new skill set at a higher level. Well, that's called health and growth and growing up,
And you
right?
should do that
That's
all the time, every day. And
every
listen,
day.
I know, and you're right. I mean, sometimes I'll think about this. You know, those old film noir movies where somebody's shining on, you're sitting in a chair with a black fedora on your head and somebody's, shining a light on your face. I'll do that to myself. I will literally put on my invisible fedora and
That's adorable.
shine that light on myself. And I whine and I cry and I argue a little bit. But at the end of it, I have to admit that I was wrong and I need to
Yeah.
move it on.
And to get better, we need to let that thing
Mhm.
go and, okay, you're right, dang it. But that's humility, right? That's the difference between humility and humiliation. Humiliation says no and can't, and I'm not qualified. Humility says yes. It's like, oh, shoot, you're right. Oh, rats. I hate that about myself, but I guess I'm going to accept it. There's the humility in action. And then from there, I'm going to not tolerate it. Again, humility. I'm going to step into something better. And that's a really powerful way to live. Because I mean, how many floors are there in our lives?
We'll never
It
know. If we
yeah,
limit them, we'll know that we had 2 or 3 or whatever it
exactly,
was, but if
exactly.
we're not limiting, we're not going to know until we reach heaven.
Exactly. I really don't think there are any limits. I do think we, inclusive, me, tend to find a level that feels like, wow, I'm there. That's where I want to build my platform or my foundation, my capacity triangle. And then when something squeezes out that invites me higher, I'm like, oh man, do I really want to do that? Is that the kind of person I want to be? Well, I like the idea of being that person that grows. Am I willing to change and shift in the heart and do that person that grows? And so, yeah, I am. And I think you are. I think your listeners are. This is why we're talking, right? Because we're a group that are growing.
And we're curious. We're
Mm,
intensely curious about why we do the things we do, how we do the things we do, why other people do the things they do, and you just on and on and on. We're
hmm.
very curious, and I'm an autodidact, which I didn't even know for the longest kind of time. But I need to break things. I need to learn constantly, and I'll break it and put it back together just for the fun of it.
Wow.
I
That's a
know.
great word.
Well,
4
uh,
syllables, girl. That's like the biggie of the day right there.
autodidact, try it. But it's
Autodidact.
yeah. But, I'm constantly learning. It basically what it means is you're self-taught because you don't stop searching, you don't stop being curious. And I think you and me and so many of our audience are just like that. We're always looking around going, "Wow, what's next?"
Man, how does this work? And how
Yeah.
can I embrace that or get that into my toolkit? Yeah, that's really fun.
And you mentioned orphan a few minutes ago, and this is one of the more intriguing concepts in your book. What do you mean by the orphan system of twin evils? I had to read that a couple of times.
Oh, wow. So, orphanism isn't a word, but I use it. So,
It's a
um,
word now. We just
it's a word now. Yeah,
you heard it here
orphanism.
first.
Yeah, it's not speaking to the actual condition of an orphan, meaning a parentless person. This is a mindset or a belief structure where you don't feel like you belong. Orphanism. You feel like you are alone. You feel like and back to our triangle, you are your protector, you are your provider, and you are your value bringer, your self worth giver. And so when you're orphaned, when you have an orphan mindset, that is like a parent spirit. If you can imagine a puppeteer with strings, and let's put two puppets below this imaginary puppeteer. Let's label the puppeteer the orphan spirit, the um, the thing that is empowering or enforcing and reinforcing this concept that you don't belong or you are valueless. Now, the puppets that this puppet master is articulating or activating um, come in pairs of opposite twins. So, if you can imagine the puppet on the left is I'll just use colors. Let's say one is blue and one is red.
And I'm thinking of the angel and the demon on your shoulders.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what I don't want to do, the angel and demon implies good and bad. That's why I don't want to use black and white.
Got
Um,
it.
because the twins are both black. They're both dark. They're evil. And so the twins, so this enemy is the enemy of everyone's souls. It is the devil. It's the orphan himself. He is the orphan spirit. So this evil is trying to be a father. He's trying to father people. And so when people fall into this twin structure that you're asking about, they then stand between these two colors. And I'm going to use blue and red just because I don't know why, but there's no significance meant there. It's just they're both bad and um, they tend to be twins because they find a powerful thing that they try to polarize you on. So if you can imagine a dollar sign in the middle of these two puppets, and the dollar sign is a powerful thing. Money is very powerful. You know, there we can we can we can worship it, we can accumulate it, we can use it to give us identity, we can do all kinds of things with money. It gives us choices. It can also ruin us. So the thing I like to think of as money, this dollar sign between these two puppets, is both a natural power, gives me the choice to go buy things and influence things. It also gives me a spiritual power. It exaggerates the things that I believe internally. And now we're back to the triangle. If we have believe inside, let's look at the base of the triangle. If we have this imposter syndrome belief system that's kind of nagging away at us, and you add a powerful thing to that, meaning if money is added to an imposter, what happens is that spiritual belief gets bigger. It's like fertilizer, right? It just causes it to explode. And that's why we are generally suspicious of wealthy people, because when wealth, which is a broader label than money, but let's just expand this dollar sign into the broader category of wealth, and that wealth lands on someone with a weak um, triangle capacity, what happens is that money makes that structure explode or exaggerate. And when that thing gets bigger, that's where you get villains from. That's where you get um, monsters. That's why many people mistrust money and wealth. It's because they've seen monsters come from it. But money is inert. It's like a shoe. You put it on, you wear it, you walk on it. It's a thing to be used, but it's going to be used based on your triangle structure. So back to my puppets. Um, the structure I've observed is that evil comes in pairs of opposites, and it builds those opposites around anything powerful because it's trying to exploit that power. So money is power, beauty is power, authority is power. There's many versions of power, and I don't posture myself as if I know all the encyclopedia of powers. All I know best is that money is a power, both naturally and spiritually. It exaggerates me. And that around this powerful thing are two twin opposites. Those are my puppets, the blue puppet and the red puppet. The blue puppet might be poverty and poverty thinking, poverty spirit. The red puppet I would call greed, avarice, or biblically it's called mammon. Mammon is not greed directly. Greed is like a echo of the spirit of mammon. Mammon means worship of money, worship of the power that money brings. So if we think about these puppets, a poverty puppet, the blue puppet, is really a powerless mindset. It's a victim identity. Life happens to me. It's their fault. They did this to me. The thing about poverty and a poverty mindset is it's really convenient because it gives you excuses for everything.
Yeah, you don't have
And
to think about anything. You just
yeah,
go react.
it's not my responsibility. And
Right.
I can do a lot of Facebook posts and social media around my victim paradigm. But going back, in fact, to our brief discussion on the floors, once we find a place that we settle for or we tolerate or that porcupine, we then begin to blame the porcupine. That's the victim mindset. It's, well, if it wasn't for that porcupine, I'd be doing a lot better. But we tolerate the porcupine. So that's really what we were talking about earlier was that side of this twin structure. So let's look at the other side briefly. It's the it's the mirror opposite of the blue puppet. So if the blue puppet is powerless or a victim, then the red puppet is a powerful victim. We call those villains. So now you have the victim villain relationship. And what's interesting about villains is they always find their victim. There's never a villain without a victim. They always find their victim. But the same goes with a victim, which I think is so weird. Victims always find their villain. Otherwise, they can't be a victim. So they will find the porcupine. Something in their life will be their excuse. So
Not only do
victim
they
and
find them, they go hunt for them.
they hunt them out.
They
And
do.
so we can rationally understand this, but what we, as we kind of lay out this structure, this can empower our audience because if so a victim villain, I want to highlight the word opposites. A victim is the opposite, like mirror. If I hold my hand up to a mirror, the image is the exact representation of my hand, but it's opposite,
It's
right?
reversed. Yeah.
It's reversed. Yeah. So that's your victim villain pairing. And I like to think of the victim villain puppets like a tightrope, and they're on each end of the tightrope. Earlier, I said the orphan polarizes things. Here you have the polar opposites. So if you can picture, I'm sorry for for your audience, all these gymnastics, but I don't have a whiteboard and you can't see my arms waving around. So I've got to use we've got to use our imagination. Picture a
I am. I
tightrope.
can actually see you doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Keep
let's
on
put the
going.
tightrope, yeah, let's put the tightrope maybe 12 inches high. So it's not, this isn't a dangerous thing like a high, you know, gymnastics or a tightrope walker in a circus. But there's this rope and these two posts driven into the ground and we stand on this rope. If we're between this structure, we are standing on this tightrope. And what's interesting about money, the subject of money being the tightrope, is people tend to argue and debate where should we be on the tightrope. Should we be humble and small? And that would mean I've got to scooch my feet over toward the blue puppet end, the poverty mindset, the lack, the less than. How humble is that? How how simple and beautiful is that? Okay. And so this person, if you can see, this kind of scooches their feet on this tightrope over toward the lack end or the victim end. And then my experience is I grew up on the victim end. And one day I was like, this sucks. I don't know if I can say that here, but it does. I hate poverty. And I'm sick and tired of being poor and broke and choiceless. And so I'm going to turn my back on that puppet and walk the opposite direction. And so what I do is I start scooching my feet across the rope to the other end. I'm going to be powerful. I'm going to be I'm going to happen to life instead of life happening to me. So
Ooh,
if
say that again. That's important.
I'm
You're going
going
to
to
happen, right?
I'm going to happen to my life instead of life happening to me. I'm tired. See, a victim, life happens to the victim. And over on the villain side, it's like, so a villain is simply a powerful victim. So a villain is like, well, I'm going to happen to it before it happens to me. Or you did this to me, I'm going to get my revenge. This is back to what I said. This is where monsters are made because this entire tightrope structure is the thing you asked. The orphan puppet master is articulating twin evils around a powerful thing, the tightrope. And the debate becomes where is the right spot on the tightrope? On the blue end, on the red end, or some blended balance of purple in the middle, or some variation thereof. But the bottom line is there's no good place between two evils. The whole tightrope structure is a trap. The enemy, the orphan, doesn't care whether we are fixated on the blue puppet or the red puppet. He doesn't care where we are. And, people are debating whether we should have more or less all of time. That tells us that we're dealing with a concept that is not just us. It's not a modern issue. It is past, it is present, and it will be a future issue. The
Oh, look at
key,
history. This has been going on
yeah,
ever
for
since man can walk upright.
since we could draw and write
That's right.
notes, we've been
None of this is
talking
new.
about this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that tells us we're dealing with an ancient or a timeless, possibly an eternal issue. Then we need to solve it. I mean, we can have a choice, but my choice was, oh, I have to beware of opposites because that's me like a pendulum swinging back and forth. And I see a lot of people that I deal with working back and forth between these twin opposites. So, keyword opposite. If I'm on the blue puppet end of this tightrope and I decide I hate it, I'm leaving, I will turn my back on the blue puppet and walk in the opposite direction. The same goes on the red puppet end. And we know of, wealthy people who have thrown away all and given away all their wealth and live in the woods and eat grubs or whatever they do. They've just gone back to, you know, basics. They've gone off grid because they don't want that corrupted mammon meanness that inhabits that end of the spectrum. But what they do is when they left, they turned their back on the red puppet and they walk the opposite direction. So opposites become a compass. Opposites orient us into the arms of the opposite evil. That's why evil comes in pairs of opposites. And so what we don't want to find is an opposite. We want to find an alternative. So alternatives make us step off the tightrope. They make us step that little 12-inch height onto the floor and go to a third alternative, and that would be the hero. So now we have the timeless structure of every great piece of literature ever written has a victim, a villain, and a hero. Why is that? Because it's timeless and absolutely bone deep, DNA deep in the experience of humanity is we recognize the greatness of the hero and the necessity of a hero to rescue the victims. So victims themselves are not evil. They are saturated and familiar with a mindset. The same with the mammon end, the red puppet end of this tightrope. Those people aren't evil. They are just blind to the porcupine. So stepping to an alternative is the key and one of the basic pillars of growing our capacity. We have to recognize there is a system and we are probably walking the tightrope. And so, what does it look like to go off the tightrope? And I'll just say briefly, it's really scary because there are no roadmaps from the structure to the alternative
And we
that
don't
are
know what we don't know.
that's like sailing into the open ocean. I
Yeah.
this came to me, and someone who, if someone reads the book, and you'll remember probably in the introduction, I talk about a sailboat circling an island that is really treacherous. And that sailboat is my life, my family life. And the island is the blue puppet. It's the structure and dangers and hazards and obvious and oddly the comforts of poverty, the convenience of having a villain to blame, because that was just my poverty mindset when I grew up as a kid. And there's reasons we could talk if we care, but those things were so native to me. I never even thought about it. I just knew I didn't trust rich people and money was bad. Except how
Yeah.
weird that I'm always pursuing it, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. And I've always heard this all my life. Oh, he's rich as sin. What the heck does that mean?
hmm yeah, yeah.
Is
Or
it, it's
if
not a nice thing to say.
it's not, and I think it is an inaccurate statement. These little truisms we bat around carry shades of truth, but we have to be careful because if we make them our mantra or our internal structure, what they do is they feed and reinforce these familiar mindsets, and they justify us. That's back to the familiarity piece, right? We want to feel safe, and if we just think he's rich as sin, that's evil. I'm not evil. I'm also poor. That's no fun. But at least I'm not rich as sin. So we come up with these gymnastics mentally. And so I think back to your point, Denise, how honest you are with yourself at night
I
as you're
try.
yeah, as you slip off into sleep. That's a superpower of yours. That is not natural. That's not what natural people do. That's a supernatural exercise. That's something better than natural. And that's what this group is about, right? We're reaching for the supernatural. We're reaching for what does God think about us? What is his structure? And I think this is really powerful. So I hope this is helpful to your audience. I hope it was clear enough. The structure of the puppeteer is orphanism, that you don't belong, you're not enough, that that you are your provider, protector, and identity giver. And in that vacuum, there is provided for you two puppets. and if
Right.
you're not careful, um, it's like that awful continental breakfast at some restaurants, or at some hotels. Yeah, you get to have that, but I mean, it's really horrible a
Yeah,
lot of
don't
times,
don't
and
do
it's
it.
like, yeah, just don't, just say no,
Yeah, just
and
keep on walking.
yeah, yeah, go get a real meal. But yeah, this structure will be there, and I do think it's beyond money. I think it's probably in the political realm. It's probably in the let's say military police realm. All of these powerful places in the celebrity realm. There's a lot of power we place and accept um, in the celebrity realm, and I
I
love
don't. Trust me, I don't.
well, yeah, that's
Minute
good.
I see
I
somebody says they're an influencer, I'm out. I'm out the door.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's a cultural oddity that we are living through, and maybe we have an advantage being older. I'm older than you, Denise, but I think the younger generation does not have that filter. They're looking for their values. I was talking to somebody the other day. There's a group of young people. I won't say who this artist is because I don't want to dishonor anybody, but they mentioned this artist and how powerful they were, and that and I'll have to stop or else I'll uncover this artist, but he's wildly successful. And so I thought, well, I'm
Email
an
me.
old.
Email
I
me. I
will.
have to know.
And I was like, well, I want to go check him out because I am curious. And so I went and listened to a handful of his most popular songs. They were so terrible. They were, I was
I'm
like,
going to guess they were absolutely foul.
they were foul. They
Yep.
had no, there, it was all the music was computer. There was no there. I was thinking, where is the skill and excellence in this? This is just an angry person spewing his anger, and people are relating to it. I thought,
And
wow.
that's scary because we and you need to come back, by the way. We're about out of time, so you need to come back in the new year. But what I wanted to ask you about, and we're talking about it a little bit, but is it education, habits, fear, identity? And identity, I think, is one of the most dangerous things these days because people seem to be picking up their identity from social media.
Oh yeah.
And
Well,
that's frightening.
identity is the subject of it's the primary subject of humanity. And there's only two choices. And this would be a great discussion if I ever come back because I
Yeah,
do
you're
a
coming back in
ton
the new
of
year.
work.
You are.
I
Just
I do a
write it
ton of
down.
work in the identity area, but there's only two choices at identity. You're either adopted or you're orphaned. You either belong or you don't. Fundamentally, it's a very, very simple thing. And if you find yourself orphaned and and how do you know if you're orphaned? Well, do a little pillow time, like you were describing to your audience. Let's do a little pillow time and just do a reflection. What's my internal voice saying about me? What's that tape that runs over and over? What do I feel like when I'm threatened or confronted or challenged or having to confront? What is going on with me when I lose a client or 2 or 10? What things squeeze out of our toothpaste tube? And it always will come back to the subject of identity.
It does. And I'll tell you how I do this. And I've talked about it before on the show, but we've talked about it, in passing a couple of times. And I think it's important. I don't sleep a whole lot. I never have. I sleep in fits and starts. Maybe if I get 4 hours a night, I'm like, ooh. If I sleep 6 hours a night, I'm going to a doctor because I'm probably sick. I just don't need that much sleep. And my mother, I started reading when I was 3. And she would tell me, before she passed away, "Well, you don't sleep because it cuts into your reading time." And I couldn't argue with her about that. It's true.
That's hilarious. That's
But
fun.
but when I'm about to go to sleep, and you'll see these cute little memes on Instagram, like, "How do you know when it's time to go to bed?" Well, when the iPad hits you in the nose and you
Oh,
say, "Ouch," or your phone. With me, it's an iPad Pro, and that hurts, by the way.
that is a heavy thing. Yeah,
Yeah, it
it's
is.
fun.
But just about when I know I'm just about to sink into sleep, this time for the real this time, because I never try to talk myself into going to sleep, I will literally say out loud, because I don't believe we're alone. Might be the spiders in the ceiling fan, it could be gremlins, it could be God, it could be,
Mhm,
it could be anything. Aliens,
mhm.
I don't know. But people, something hears us. I think that the ether hears us, that nature hears us. So I will say my prayers out loud, looking up at the ceiling fan, and I've already gone and put my iPad in another room because I don't wanna pick it up again and knock myself out. I don't
Yeah.
like to sleep with electronics. But then I will go into and I will tell my subconscious, "Okay, let's have a chat." And I will say, "Listen, I had this issue today. I was looking at a bunch of code. I could not work it out. It was frustrating the heck out of me. What was I doing wrong? Where's the answer?" And I'm telling you, at 3:18, might have been 1:30 when I went to sleep, but at 3:18, I will wake up. And I'll tell you how powerful this is. My arm was hurting. This was Thanksgiving about 4 or 5 years ago. This was right before Thanksgiving. And I woke up and I really thought I would just go ahead and amputate my arm. That's how bad it hurt. Nothing was showing. There was nothing on my arm. There was no bruise. I hadn't hurt myself, but it was agony. And I kept saying, "What the heck is this?" So the next day I went to my subconscious. I said, "I don't know what this is, but it doesn't feel right. What is this?" 3:18, I woke up and I wrote down shingles. And by God,
Oh my
it
goodness.
was. And that's the day, once I wrote down shingles, all of a sudden, here comes the rash. But my
Wow.
subconscious knew before I did, before I
Yeah,
even thought to go see, a walk-in clinic or something. So, and let me tell y'all, that hurts. Don't get it.
I've heard that it does.
It's
Yeah.
awful. But I remember saying, and I wrote it down on my notepad, shingles, I thought that had been eradicated. I was actually thinking of scurvy when I wrote that down, but it was shingles. So,
That's hilarious. That
that's the
is
way
a
my mind works.
that is the greatest story of my day and my whole week. Thank you. That is delightful. See,
But it does.
as a
Talk to
farmer,
yourself.
I grew up on a cattle ranch with my uncle who ran this ranch, and we had cattle and calves with scurvy occasionally we had to treat. So that just brought all kinds of delightful, horrible memories from my childhood. Thank
You
you for that.
never knew. You're welcome. I mean, but and I do it without fail, and because I don't sleep more than about 2 hours at a time, I'm going to fall asleep, hopefully, at least a couple more times, and I will do it multiple times. So I'm not just having one conversation with my subconscious, I've had me several.
That's amazing.
It
Thank you
works.
for sharing that.
Try it, it works. Listen, you do have to come back next year. I'm going to send you a link, and you can get scheduled for next year, and we'll talk about identity and anything else you want. But before I say goodbye to you, what is one money myth that you would love to see disappear?
Oh, wow. The first thing that comes to mind is helpless. I would love to see that
Oh,
us become powerful, and not in the way that a villain becomes powerful, but in the way a hero is powerful. And I would love to see that destroyed in my lifetime. That's kind of the mission behind my nonprofit.
right. Where can people find you, and where can they find your book? And everybody, get the book. Seriously. It belongs in your entrepreneurial library.
Thank you. I have a website. It's www.prosperoussoul.com, and you can find my book there, although it's much cheaper on Amazon. So if you buy from my site, I'll autograph it. If you want just the best deal, just go online, order it from Amazon.
Got it. You autographed mine. I took a picture of it. Okay, well, I did. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today and for being willing to come back again in the new year. I have to tell you, I am booked now all the way through October. So, New Year it is.
Wow.
I know.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
It's kind of interesting. I get to meet the greatest people, but yeah, thank you. So, listen, this has been one of those conversations that reminds us that financial success isn't just about earning money, it's about understanding ourselves, identifying the beliefs that shape our decisions, healing unhealthy patterns, rather, and creating the capacity. And write that down because we talked about that a lot. Creating the capacity to wisely manage the resources that we've been entrusted with. So, your insights encourage us to look between the surface and recognize that lasting prosperity begins with transformation from the inside out. And thank you for sharing your wisdom and practical guidance. I'm getting tired with our audience, Stephen. And thank you to everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Your Partner in Success Radio. Today, we explored how financial capacity often determines financial outcomes more than income alone, which might be surprising to some, but he explains it very well. And Stephen K. Silva shared just how limiting beliefs, unhealthy money patterns, and deeply rooted mindsets, and we're going to dig into that again next time, can quietly sabotage even highly successful people. And more importantly, he explained that financial healing is possible through intentional growth, awareness, healthier beliefs, and practical stewardship. So if today's conversation resonated with you, be sure to share this episode with friends, colleagues, and anyone looking to build a healthier relationship with money. And as always, you will find this episode and thousands of other conversations with world-class experts at yourpartnersuccessradio.com. Until next time, remember success is not just about what you achieve, it's about who you become along the way. I'm Denise Griffitts. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next time. Thank you, Stephen.